Hi. Hello. Welcome. Today I wanted to get into something a little bit more specific that the guys at my friendly local game store have been talking about recently. And what we've been talking about with, Age of Sigmar 3 and everything that's coming out and the slow trickle of new battle tomes is knowing your enemy is more important than knowing your own army. I think Sun Tzu said something about that. The one thing I've noticed, though, with Age of Sigmar 3 and all the new battle tomes is that I've sunk my teeth, pun intended, into the Soulblight Gravelords army, and I've been having a blast playing them. However, I have found that my opponents, not so much. So I wanted to make a video that helps you understand my army. And of course, as the title says, I want you to kick my ass. Now, what I've seen is videos about how people can utilize and optimize their own armies to win games, but what I've rarely seen is people breaking down their own armies and tell others how they can beat their army. And since I've seen so few content in this regard, I decided, why not do it? So here we are. Now, I'm not a pro player. I don't regularly attend tournaments, and I still think helping people beat my army is a good thing to do. So take all of my information with a grain of salt as just a casual player playing with a mix of competitive and casual players with a grain of salt. While I'm not a pro player or regularly attend tournaments, I still think I can give some insight from a more casual perspective or someone who plays against a mix of both competitive and casual players. At least this is the stuff that I've seen or researched myself. Hell, a battle report or two. The biggest thing to me that I want you to take away from this is that the games that I enjoy the most are the ones where it's a back and forth. It's a hard-fought battle. You're scraping by with the last points that you have to see what grand strategy you can come up with, hoping you can make a Hail Mary pass or have the dice gods be on your side. And the best way to do that is to have you use all the tools to kick my ass. So with that out of the way, let's start off with the army's overall abilities, allegiance abilities. Strap in. There's a lot. First off, we have the Unquiet Dead. This is the first main ability that's going to be relevant, so take notes. What this allows the army to do is set up a Soulblight summonable unit into reserves and have them reappear, or deep strike for those of you that know 40k. However, they need to emerge from a graveyard that has been set up on the battlefield. What is a graveyard, you ask? Good question. A graveyard is 4 points on the battlefield, usually denoted by a token or some sort. Usually the tokens come with, if you buy the Battle War Scrolls or something like that, you can use whatever chips you have as long as it's denoted and different from everything else on the battlefield. I use the tokens that came with the War Scrolls, personally. 2 of them have to be wholly set up within the Gravelords starting territory. 2 of them can be anywhere on the battlefield. Keep that in mind. Now, at the end of any movement phase, first, second, third, you're able to set up one of these units that you put aside and you can deep strike them in or bring them out of reserves. However, they need to be wholly within 12 inches and 9 inches away from enemy models. So normally it's not going to come up. It's not really going to be used. So you don't need to worry about it too much. But I've seen it used once or twice, so don't forget about it. But since they have to let you know before the game starts, you can account for it. Secondly, the army is so hero dependent that deep striking away from your main core, your main force multiplier, doesn't make a lot of sense, at least in my mind. So again, not going to come up that often. Next up is the Locus of Shaesh. Now, what this does is it helps their casters A lot. A lot. Essentially, when a Death Wizard casts a spell that is from the lore of Death Mages or Vampires, specifically only those two, not a War Scroll ability, not a Magic Shield, not any of that. It has to be from those two War Scrolls. So keep that in mind for yourself and for your opponent, who might get a little too giddy that he got 2 magic missiles off. Now, on an unmodified 9+, the spell triggers twice, if it is not unbound. So if you unbind the spell, both instances go away. Pretty good for you. Now, the most important thing is the spell triggers twice, but let's say it's a personal cast. It can't go on him twice. Let's say a unit can only be affected by that spell once. Then it can't target that same unit. Things like that are limitations which are taken into account for this codex, but keep in mind, if they get a 9+, some spells in here are gonna hurt if they go off twice. So for all you people who have wizards and the ability to unbind, keep that in mind if you see them roll a 9+ about which spells you might want to unbind. Next up, we have Deathless Minions, one of the slices of bread with delicious butter for this army. They get a 6+ ward save when they are within 12 inches, wholly within 12 inches, of a hero or a graveyard. Keep the graveyards in mind. This is huge for the army. All right? So many times I have saved squads or heroes by being able to get that 6+ ward save, right? Now, never feel bad to ask your opponent if they are wholly within 12 inches of a hero or of a gravesite for this ability. Because if one dumb skeleton got moved or misplaced just outside of it, that whole squad is without that buff, and that is a huge boon for you. Now, of course, it is a game of gentlemen, and you can ask him to shove it back, or if he's just off by a little bit, that's fine. But I've had instances where I mismoved and I was out by a whole 2 inches, and that squad just got almost wiped because of that silly mistake. So keep it in mind for yourself and for your opponent. All right, on to the next ability. Yes, they have more. We still have more abilities for this army. Don't worry, we're halfway there though. Now, Reanimated Horrors is the undead being spooky, scary skeletons being spooky. Now, basically, if you're within 6 inches, not wholly within, just within 6 inches of a Death Walkers or a Death Rattle unit, you lose 1 bravery. If you are within 2 units, you get -2. However, it caps off at -2. Think whichever god you want. There's a lot of them in Sigmar. Now, where this starts to matter for your army facing off against the Gravelords is a lot of the time you're going to take MSU units or screening units, probably thinking you're going to be fine because of the bravery characteristic, and I'll lose a guy or 2, but I'll be fine. I can't lose to bravery. As soon as skeletons and zombies start getting close, you're going to have to start to worry. And again, moving is pretty important for the Soulblight army as well as yours, as much as I hate to say it. Hello, this is Recording Dredges here, and I just wanted to apologize that I'm going to be throwing in some terminology from Warhammer 40k and other stuff, so I just wanted to clarify that MSU stands for Minimum Sized Unit. This is your 5-man or your 10-man squad that you don't reinforce to add another 5 or 10. That's all. Now, the last of the 2 ones you have to worry about. It's the ones that you have to worry about the most, because it's going to come up time and time again. Endless Legions and Deathly Invocation. Now, Endless Legions has gotten FAQ, so look that up on the Warhammer community site for up-to-date rules. Endless Legion. At the end of the battle shock phase, you can pick a unit that has been killed. 5+, that unit gets returned to the battlefield. However, the player gets to add +1 to the roll for every enemy unit destroyed that turn. You have to place this unit, again, the normal stipulations with deep striking that they have, wholly within 12 inches of a gravesite and 9 inches away from enemy units. So, realistically, on a good turn, he'll have a 4+ to roll if he killed 1 unit. If he's really on a roll, he's placed my 4 markers. Now what's commonly is going to happen is I'm going to place one way over on the other side of the board. Way away from all the fighting, maybe near an objective. And once one of my guys dies and I can bring them back, I'm just going to all the way on the other side of the board. So now you have to rush some guys over or overcommit to that side while I sit on an objective or, flank you on one side. It's something to keep in mind. Graveyards are important. Keep them in mind and where they are, how they're going to be utilized. There's too many times I've been able to do some pretty silly shenanigans because of it. However, the good thing to note is the reanimation is limited to summonable units. So powerful vampires and other monsters aren't going to be getting back up, but most of their battle line and their mooks will be able to. Now, what are their summonable units? We'll get into that later on in the video when I break down the 3 main groups of the army, and we'll let you know which one are summonable units. The last caveat is that a unit that has been brought back cannot be brought back again. Once it's dead, it's dead. You gotta double tap it, right? Remember rule number 2, Zombieland. The last thing that I forgot to mention about it is when the unit gets brought back, it is only brought back at half strength. Meaning if it's at 20 man strong, it comes back with 10. If it was at 10, it comes back with 5. So on and so forth. And if that unit dies again, finito. That's it. Curtain call. Last but not least, Deathly Invocations. Essentially, all of the death heroes pick summonable units they want to heal that are wholly within 12 inches. They pick a number of units based on the keywords that they have. I'll have it up on screen to show you how many get which. The number doesn't matter too much. You get to roll a d3. That unit either heals that many wounds or gets to bring back that many wounds of models slain. So if it's skeletons who have 1 wounds, say you get a 3, you get 3 skeletons back. Say it's a dire wolf that has 2 wounds and you rolled a 3 or a 2, you get 1 model back. So what that means is all the work you did to bring them back is for naught. There's a lot of mechanics in this army to bring things back to life or to negate all of the models you've killed. Expected from, an army of necromancers and vampires, but again, something to keep in mind. So the biggest thing that I hope that you're seeing from all of these different abilities is that heroes, heroes, heroes. Once they die, it's basically game over for the Gravelords. They are such a huge force multiplier for the entire the fact that you get a free reroll on a pass or a fail, they could fish for that 9 up on a spell. They could try to get a higher roll. It's something to keep in mind, and why 9 times out of 10 you're going to pick this dynasty over anything else. Let's get into the command traits and the relics of this dynasty. Now, they'll be up on screen somewhere. I don't know where I'm putting it yet. So pause, read it if you have to. But realistically, half of the Warlord abilities I wouldn't take, and I don't think are going to be taken most times. The reason being is they're one-time use, and they might pack a bit of a punch, but not enough to really be worth taking for the entire game. The one that is the most important is Pack Alpha. I choose it every time without fail. The reason being is once per turn, you get a free command point, essentially. You get to issue a command for free. And having a free command point or an ace up your sleeve where your opponent thinks that you've used all your command points, but you got one sitting on your general, it's very useful. And in a game where you're limited on what you can do and you want to cast out as many command abilities as you want, having an extra one on your Warlord is going to be definitely worthwhile. Now, the relics, again, they'll be on screen. This one, of course, is going to be more situational, right? But I always lean into something that gives a benefit all game instead of, again, a one shot or a one drop ability. While sometimes they can be useful, I prefer something that's static and consistent throughout the whole game. One of them increases your aura that gives the 6 up feel no pain by 6 inches. It's okay if you feel like you want to kind of extend a little bit further or castle up. I can see it being useful, but I don't take it most of the time, right? There's another one that gives you D3 extra attacks on the charge. Again, it's useful, but how many times are you going to be charging into combat? It's going to go off once, maybe twice. The one I always feel I should choose is being able to pile in an extra 3 inches. I think, what is that one called? Yes. Cloak of the Night Prowler. The bearer can pile in an extra 3 inches when they make a pile-in move. It doesn't seem that crazy, but again, being able to pile in 6 inches gets you to wrap around or maybe ding another unit if you need to, pull someone else into combat. It has a lot more versatility in the game and gets to be used every time you're in combat. So if you're up against a blob, you can slowly shift around the blob, and I feel like it'll be useful every time. So that's the one that I see taken the most. But again, everything's situational, or maybe someone has a brilliant idea with something else. But you're mostly going to be facing this artifact. All right. Spell lores. Let us move on to spell lores. Oh boy. So all wizards in the Soulblight army know the invigorating aura ability, which heals a unit for 3 or brings back that many models and wounds, 3 skeletons, 1 wolf. It works very similar to the other ability that the heroes dish out at the command phase, but now it's in spell form. Like I was saying, they can heal a lot and bring back a lot of dudes. This is one of them. Now, the casting value is 8. 8, you say. However, they get a +1 for every hero they control on the field. So they got 3 heroes, 4 heroes, not too uncommon. It's going to turn into a 5-up or a 4-up casting value. So a unit that was on the verge of death can get brought back into fighting action pretty quick here. Let's say it's a 10-man squad. You kill 5 of them, right? He heals back 3 in his command phase. You cast 3, even 2, and he heals 3 more. Squad's back up to 10. Everything you just did was for naught. And that's kind of what Soulblight likes to do a lot. Now, I haven't used this spell a lot myself during games, but having it in your back pocket is very useful. And it's something, and again, another ace up their sleeve, so don't forget it. Now, again, like every battle tome, there are lots of spell options, but most will not be taken. Now, I'll have them on screen so you can pause, you can read, you can look them up, all that fun stuff. Now, I'm not going to go through with a fine-tooth comb over every spell and every possibility. I'm going to give you the spark notes, about what's probably going to be taken and what to look out for. Let's go over the ones that are going to be taken by the vampires, or the vampire lores. The first one is Spirit Gale, Soul Pike, and maybe Amistine Pinions. Depends. The other half aren't even worth looking at. Spirit Gale is going to be taken if you have an army that has... It's going to be taken if, let's say, you're playing against an army that has low bravery. So when I fight against goblins or other armies that generally have a low bravery, I'll take this because when you cast a spell, whatever the value is, it doesn't matter. 18 inches, if it goes off, you roll 2d6. Whatever the value is on the 2d6, whatever is above their bravery is going to be mortal wounds. So let's say they have a 5 and you roll 8. They take 3 mortal wounds. Pretty good, right? But you have to remember one of the previous abilities that the army had, which is reducing your bravery by 1 or 2 if you're a little too close to some zombies or some skeletons. So this spell gets a lot more mileage than I think it has any right to, in a sense. The army plays well into this. So understand that if you have certain units up against the mob of skeletons and zombies, the spell might go off if you have some low bravery dudes in the front. As well, keep in mind that if you get a 9+ on the spell, it's going to trigger twice and it can target the same unit. So be aware. Soul Spike is the most taken spell that I've seen in competitive lists and casual lists all around. The reason being is that it penalizes people for charging you, rather one target. So if I cast it, I get to pick one enemy unit. The distance in inches you charge me, I get that many dice. On a 4 up on those dice, you take a mortal wound. So let's say you make a 6-inch charge. I get 6 dice, and every roll of a 4 up, you take a mortal wound. Essentially, this is a deterrent spell. This is the fall on your own blade at your own discretion. Because if you don't charge me, you're fine. You don't take any damage. But you risk that damage every time you want to charge me. When the spell's on you, of course. And this is a big deterrent if the Soulblight player doesn't want a specific hero or monster or something coming into combat. Or let's say you have a weaker unit doing a last hurrah trying to get in, and I target them. It's a good way of either killing them before they even get in and get to fight, or making you think twice about what you want to charge with. A lot of the times it's going to be placed pretty smartly. I've used it a couple times to stop big monsters or specific heroes that have really good relic from wrecking my front line. Very rarely do people actually fall on the blade to take the damage or the risk to go in. But if you've got enough wounds, people, charge it. It's not going to be that much damage. It's really not. Take it. Just get in there. Don't let them trick you. The last one is Amethyst Pinions. It allows the caster to gain 6-inch additional movement. That's it. Basically, they're sonic, gotta go fast. Most of the time, this is going to has to be a vampire casting it, or Nagash. Why would Nagash cast this, though? What they do is they get 6-inch movement. They're a vampire, so they have fly. They can still charge. They're probably going to have a base movement of 6 or 10 inches, so that's 12 or 16 inches. Basically, no in between. They're going to fly over everything. They're going to get as close as humanly possible and charge you. That's it. So if they're casting the spell, they want to get into combat fast and hard. That's really the only time I can see it being taken. Death Mages. Realistically, there's only a couple units in the army that can take the Death Mages, which is Nagash, a Necromancer, and I think some of the Mortarks, or like the big casters. Otherwise, it's probably just going to be a Necromancer casting these spells. But funny enough, unlike the vampire lores, the death spells, they're pretty good, right? And I always kind of change it up every game and kind of see and go, I think it'll be good this game. I think this will be good against this army. All of them are debuff. All of them penalize the opponent's army in some way. So let's go over them. The other thing to remember is all of these spells I'm about to talk about, on a 9+, they trigger twice. Now, Overwhelming Dread is -1 to hit for the unit targeted, right? The unit that they target, if it goes off successfully against them, they have -1 to hit for all of their weapon profiles. Pretty good, right? You can hit some ranged guys. You could probably hit someone who's in close combat and make it a little harder, right? Fading Vigor. -1 attack from all melee weapon profiles to a minimum of 1. This is pretty good. This is pretty good. Now it's a minimum of 1, but it also negates any buffs you're about to do, so on and so forth. It can take some pretty swingy models or units that have 2 or 3 attacks and bring them down to 1 or 2, which it adds up. It adds up. Spectral Grasp. If an enemy unit is on or within 3 inches of a terrain feature at the start of their movement phase, half their movement. You can make a super slow army, a dirt slow, stuck in the mud army, just dig in even deeper, make the move even slower. But most of the tables that I play on don't have a crazy amount of terrain features or anything that's of consequence most of the time. So this spell won't be taken that often, but I can see myself taking this spell if I know the army is either really fast or really slow. Anything in between, I have no reason to take this. The one time I would take it is if a certain faction likes to place terrain features all over the board. Looking you, Sylvaneth. Prison of Grief, our next spell. When the target unit tries to move on a 5+, no. So let's say you have a unit that needs to get into combat or has to make a move or, get to some point and they just have to be able to do it. If I cast the spell on you on a 5+ the next time you try and move until my next command phase, no. Now, it is more of a high risk, high reward scenario, right? It's a very clutch spell where you're down to the wire and you're trying to stop someone from moving. So on a 5+, if they try to retreat from combat, no. On a 5+, if they try to move somewhere, no. But it's a 5+, so it's very high risk, high reward. Keep it in mind, but it won't be taken too often. Decrepify. Pick one enemy hero, -1 to their wound rolls, and -1 damage from all of their melee weapons. Now, I see this one as being huge, depending. You can even neuter some heroes with this, and you can swing the tide of battle pretty bad. I'm going to double check the wording specifically. Yes. So to a minimum of 1 attack. Yes, the damage characteristic to a minimum of 1. I wanted to make sure of that. So you reduce the damage by 1 and it's -1 to wound you, which can add up pretty big. If you want to, you can use another spell in conjunction with it. You've got 2 necromancers and give them also -1 to hit where they are just at a huge disadvantage. Again, this one will probably be taken because you hit one of their big heroes that's probably going to get into combat. Bob's your uncle. So this one is definitely on the chopping block if you see it being cast. Lastly is Soul Harvest. It's a 3-inch smite to every enemy unit, but it also heals you for every wound that they take on a 5+. So let's say you deal 5 wounds in total to all the units that they don't save. You roll 5 dice on a 5+, you heal wounds back. Not too shabby, not too shabby. The problem with it is that means you have to get a necromancer in close combat most of the time. And if you're in close combat with a necromancer, he's dead. He's got a 6+ armor save. He's got 5 or 6 wounds. He's dead. He's got a 6+ ward save, but it don't matter. He dead. So Soul Harvest won't be taken. You might see it on like a bigger Mortarch that can take it who wants to be in combat, but you're not going to see it on Necromancer. You're suicide bombing him at that point. Just wanted to add a note for the terminology smite. I do apologize. Smite is a 40k term in which you deal D3 mortal wounds. That is the damage that you do on the spell. I'm just having to make sure and notify for people who aren't aware of it or don't play both games. My apologies. Now, I want to do a breakdown of some units that are relevant for you to know for kicking my ass. Now, I'm not going to break down every unit. Both got shit to do today. I'm going to go over important units that I haven't talked about or need to be talked about, and we're going to break them up into categories. All right, there are 3 keywords to keep in note: Vampire, Death Rattle, and Deadwalker. I assume they're self-explanatory by their keywords and their namesakes, right? Vampires, of course, Nosferatu, Bram Stoker's Dracula, those type of vampires. Death Rattle are all of your skeletons, and Deadwalkers are all the different types of zombies. So vampires are your generals. They're the ones who cast spells all the time. They're good in melee, and they have the ability to heal themselves at the end of combat if they kill any models, not a unit, any models, and generally will have the fly keyword, of course. Granted, this healing is at the end of combat, and if they kill one model, they gain D3 wounds. So if you kill them before the end of combat, not a problem. But if you leave them on 1 wound, they have a chance of probably getting D3 back, and they're just going to sit there and be a huge soak. So keep that in mind. Anything that's a vampire has that ability to get wounds back after it kills a single model. Now, most of, if not all of the heroes you'll see on the field are going to be vampires in one way or another. They might be riding huge beasts or be a huge beast themselves, maybe a guy on foot, but most vampires are going to be leading the charge most of the time. So a good call 9 times out of 10. If it looks like a vampire, kill it. Kill it first, kill it hard, kill it fast. You go from the smallest all the way to the biggest. So Death Rattle, these are skeletons. These are your Graveguard, your basic skeletons, and your Black Knights. All of the listed units that I just said are summonable units. So if they die, they will be brought back. They can be healed the most, so on and so forth. As well, if they can be healed, they will be. Lastly, if they have a Death Rattle unit with a banner in the squad, they get to reroll 1s when making their 6-up ward save. So they get an extra chance to stay around. So keep that in mind. And a quick overview, Black Knights are the cavalry. They get to objectives quickly, they don't have many wounds, and they die quickly. All they do is tie up units and get to objectives. They have no staying power or real damage output. They can easily be dealt with and can usually be ignored. I use them if I want to get to objectives quickly. They can be brought back. Their minimum squad of 5. You can kill them really easy. They got a 5-up armor save. They're not that hard, right? They're going to get into combat. Not that hard to deal with. Not really. So don't worry too much about them. They're not scary. They're not to be worried about. Next up are the Graveguards. They can be kitted out one of 2 ways. This will vary player to player, whether they want them to be more kind of as a defensive blob or a absolute shit-wrecking monster. So if you see them with shields, they're going to have a 4-up armor save and fishing for 6s on mortal wounds, which this unit on the wound roll, a unmodified 6, is a mortal wound in addition. Keep that note, in addition. Or they can choose to have claymores and big swords, which are 2 damage each and hit like a truck. These swords also fish for mortal wounds. They're base 2 attacks, right? They come in minimum squads of, I think, 10? I have to look that up. 5 or 10. Looks like squads of 10. Okay, perfect. The thing of note with these guys is they have horns and standard bearers. Again, if they have a standard bearer, they can reroll the 1s on their ward save. And if they have a horn, if they are within 6 inches, they're going to make the charge. Basically, if they fail a charge, they always count as having it being a 6. So they have a lot of similar abilities of other units coming up here. If they're too close, they're going to get into combat. Now, they only have 1 wound each, so they're not crazy, but if they get a fight first, they can dish out some serious hurt. In addition, they can become a huge problem if they get any form of magic steroids. All right, with base 2 attacks, -1 rend, and 2 damage with the great swords, they can dish out a lot of hurt. So, again, watch out. They will fuck something up. I don't know what, but something. Lastly, regular skeletons. They aren't so special. 3s to hit, 4s to wound, a 5-up armor save, and that's really it. They're pretty baseline. Their biggest thing, though, that makes them stand out from the crowd is that when they're chosen to fight any models they lost in that phase, the fighting phase, you roll for it. On a 4+, it gets back up. So what this means is they will always try and use their skeletons to fight last, baiting out your attacks into those units as much as possible. So what that means is they're going to be baiting out attacks as much as humanly possible so that you hit their skeletons first, so that they always get a chance to bring back dudes. Sure, they're going to lose dudes, they're expecting it, but being able to bring back half, a third of them, if they're lucky of course, is going to be huge because you've already pummeled them as much as possible and they just got back up. So keep that in mind for choosing which units you want to attack, and make sure their skeletons fight first as much as possible. All right. Let us move on to Dead Walkers, or everything that's zombie in the army. Now, they don't have a crazy amount of models in the army. You've got the direwolves, zombies, one hero, and that's really it. I don't even think the corpse cart gets the keyword. Now, of course, both these units are summonable. The direwolves and the zombies. Keep this in mind for any of the abilities that affect specifically summonable units. Now, of course, they're prone to the resummoning and healing shenanigans. Now, direwolves are the most basic unit of 10 wolves, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, 4s to hit and 4s to wound, but they get a +1 to both hit and wound when they charge. So 3s and 3s, no rend, 1 damage. Pretty basic. The only terrifying thing about them is that they move 10 inches and have a bravery characteristic of 10. They are the zombie version of cavalry. They're going to get somewhere as quick as possible, either tie you up or capture an objective. And if they die, whatever, they can potentially come back because they're summonable. Now, Dead Walkers, zombies, Night of the Living Dead. These guys have been my ringer in so many games, my underdog. The unit where it's like, it's a bunch of zombies, what can they do? Let me tell you. Now, I initially wrote these guys off assuming that they weren't too great when the new Battle Tome came out. As we're about to get into, they can be pretty goddamn scary. So to start off, they have 1 attack each, 5s to hit, 5s to wound, no armor save, and 4-inch movement. You probably write them off as well, right? Let's look at their abilities. Dragged down and torn apart. They're eligible to fight in the fight phase if they are within 6 inches instead of 3 inches and can pile in an additional 3 inches. So they have a 6-inch engage bubble and they get to pile in 6 inches. Why this is scary is that turn 1, they are going to charge whatever unit they can get within 6 inches of. And my apologies, I don't mean charge. If they're within 6 inches, they're within combat. They don't need to charge, they're just piling in. You don't get to do any Overwatch or Unleash Hell on them, as it's called in Age of Sigmar. They're just in combat. That's it. So what I've seen a lot of people do, and it's very smart, if they can barely get within that 6 inches and you have the ability to redeploy, do it. Redeploy out of the way, because if they can get within 6 inches and they have any sort of magical steroids in them, they're going to fuck up whatever squad they're about to touch. Because of their next abilities. The Newly Dead is a sweet 2-for-1 combo ability. On an unmodified hit roll of 6, it is a mortal wound and the attack sequence ends. In addition, at the end of combat phase, any enemy model that died to this unit's attacks, yes, that's the mortal wounds or the regular attacks, roll a dice. On a 2+, add another zombie to the squad. With the new FAQs and how it was meant to be interpreted, yes, this can bring the zombie horde above its starting strength. So if these scary little assholes rip into an equally large blob, they are going to recreate a scene from DayZ. It will not be fun, it will not be funny, it will be terrifying. When you have a base unit of 20 zombies that, let's say, on average might kill 5 to 10 dudes, and they just add 5 to 10 dudes, and add 5 to 10 dudes, and if you can't get through that, they're just going to keep coming and ripping and tearing with mortal wounds. Because that's all you're fishing for with zombies is mortal wounds. And by God, it's going to hurt. So people always underestimate them. They don't screen them. They don't sit far enough back or remember that I told them that they have a 6-inch pile-in bubble. Holy hell. I've taken down monsters. I've taken down huge blobs of dudes, which has just bloated their squad size to ungodly proportions. So do not underestimate the zombies. Skeletons, little bit. Zombies, don't. Do not underestimate zombies. They will fuck you up, okay? This has been my TED Talk. However, the biggest thing to note is they do not have an armor save. Now, a corpse cart, if they choose the right one and it's babysitting them, they'll have a 6-up armor save. Woohoo, right? Nothing crazy. And they rely heavy on the ward saves because that's all that they get, right? So if you can swing in Sauron style, just with a lots of damage, you'll probably be fine. If you can bring them down to pretty small numbers, you'll probably be okay. It's as soon as they get to like 15 plus models that they're going to start hurting real bad. Now, those are the three main archetypes of the army: vampires, skeletons, and zombies. There are bat-like creatures that you can take that are normally from the Flesh Eater courts, but they didn't get any new models with the new battle tome, so they're not worth taking, of course, because why buy them? You should buy the new Vierkros Dynasty models. They're new. They have good rules. Let's talk about the threats and combos that the Soulblight Gravelords can use and what you got to look out for. Let's talk about some units that I haven't brought up yet that are just as important to look out for. The biggest one for me is Blood Knights. They got a new kit, so obviously their rules are pretty good. They are a vampire unit, so of course they have the healing shenanigans if they kill a model. However, they also have the banner rule that the skeletons have, so they get to reroll the ones on their ward save. Double whammy. The craziest ability they have, though, is the Riders of Ruin. In the movement phase, if they are within engagement range, they can move over enemy units as though they had fly. Granted, the units have to be under 3 wounds and not be on a mount. Any unit they pass over, however, suffers D3 mortal wounds. Any unit, so if you can zigzag in that 10 inches and not be within engagement range on the other end, they take a D3. Now, because it's limited on the wounds characteristic and the mount thing, it's not going to be hitting characters, but it can hit a whole hell of a lot else. The most important thing that they're going to be doing with it, or that I've done with it, is you hit their front line, their blocking unit, right? Their meat wall, meat shields. And I do as much damage as I can. Now, it doesn't matter if you wrap me, because all I'm going to do is hop over the enemy unit, probably to where your warlord or other heroes are hiding. And because this ability counts as a normal move in their movement phase, they can still charge. And they get bonuses on the charge. Of course they do. So they get 3 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend damage, but 2 damage on the charge. So they are going to be hurting, right? They're going to be hurting you a lot. And they're hard to pin down and they're hard to keep down. So if you can, surround them with other horsemen or trap them with something that's got a lot of wounds as much as possible, because they're going to be a slippery bunch, especially healing themselves and getting extra potential ward saves, right? Now, they're going to be a little harder to knock down because they do have a 3+ armor save and 3 wounds each, right? So either screening them with a bigger unit or positioning your heroes properly, you should be fine. If you leave any opening for them to go into, they're going to take advantage of it and kill your squishy heroes. I know I have. Okay, with those absolute monsters out of the way, I want to talk about the Necromancer and the Vampire Lord on foot. The reason they are in the same category is that alone they really aren't scary, right? The Necromancer is awful in combat, 2 attacks, 3 to hit, 3 to wound, -1 rend, D3 damage. It's not doing too much, right? 2 attacks, he's probably going to miss 1, or even fail to wound altogether. He's got a 6+ armor save. Now, he can shrug wounds onto other summonable units beside him on a 3+, but even if, but that's on a 3+. So if you just throw enough at him, either the units beside him are going to die, still a big win, or he's going to die. Pretty easy. And the Vampire Lord, you know, it's got a 3+ save, 4 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 D3 damage. It's not that scary, right? What is scary about them is that they have abilities that make the force multiplication that they can apply to other units insane. This is where their value is immeasurable to this army. Now, the Necromancer has a War Scroll spell called the Dance Macabre. This allows the targeted summonable unit to fight twice in combat until your next hero phase. Next hero phase, keep that in mind. So put that on some skeletons who lost 5 guys but only brought 2 or 3 back. They get to fish for those guys back again. So the reason why this is relevant for skeletons is fighting twice in combat. Their ability that allows them to bring dudes back that died in the fighting phase will trigger twice now because they were chosen twice to fight. So let's say you kill 5 dudes and then they bring back 1 or 2. When they're chosen to fight again, they get a fish for the rest of the dead guys. That's why it's relevant for skeletons. Of course, fighting twice is more attacks, but being able to fish back more bodies is also super relevant. Now, what if you put them on zombies? That means they get to attack all over again, fishing for those 6s, which are mortal wounds. We don't want that. You don't want that. That's going to mess up whatever they're fighting. Or hell, the Grave Guard. They can also fish for 6s and have 2 damage weapons, 1 rend. This spell is some of the magic steroids I was talking about. It turns an okay unit into something to fear. Now, being able to fight twice can be terrifying in itself, triggering different abilities or allowing to fish for more mortal wounds. You don't want that. That's going to wreck whatever line that you've set up to stop. However, when you pair this, because that's a spell, the command ability of the Vampire Lord, which choose 1 unit within, I think it's 12 inches, wholly within 12 inches, that unit gets +1 to their attacks characteristic. This is where things go from silly to horror movie. Absolutely terrifying. Oh my lord. So zombies can now, with this ability, with these 2 abilities, fight twice and have 2 attacks each. You've turned a mob of 20 dudes and 20 potential attacks into 80. That's 4 times the amount of potential mortal wounds. And I don't need to tell you that basically anything that this squad is able to throw its full weight into is gonna die. Just kill it. So usually this can only be put on 1 squad, but that 1 squad is going to eat anything it touches, especially the zombies. If they're able to fish out that many mortal wounds, if they're up against another blob of dudes, they're going to get that whole blob potentially brought into their own, and those 20 dudes might swell up to 30, 40, who knows. We don't want that. You don't want that. So this 1-2 combo makes any of the skeletons or zombies into just roided out monstrosities. Individual units have similar abilities like Radikar the Beast for when he charges an 18-inch bubble of +1 attack. But you can assume that any larger model, beast or anything of the sort, is going to be a target first, kill fast type of model. I don't really need to get into any specifics. What I'm trying to tell you is the sleeper agents, the small guys on foot that you're like, they're not going to be that much of a problem. Oh no, they are. So now that I've told you some of the silly combos and the units you need to look out for, let's go over some of the tactics to assure you the ability to kick my ass. I hope I've made it clear at this point that heroes of this army are the driving force behind all the shenanigans that are going to just make it a not fun game. So first and foremost, the most important strategy I can tell you is kill the heroes. Go from smallest to biggest if you can, and just kill them. Kill them first. Because as soon as the heroes go down, it's lights out for the army more or less. So ranged attacks are the best way to take out the Soulblight Gravelords, because they themselves don't have a lot of range firepower. So you using ranged attacks are huge. All right, you're going to have nothing to compete against, and nothing's really going to be charging into them. So you're free to fire away as much as you want on the heroes. And oh, but it's not a good choice. It is. It denies them healing. It denies them ward saves. It denies shenanigans. Killing them is huge. Most of the time they have 5 or 6 wounds. So screen the people that can shoot and just unleash hell, not the command, on the heroes. That is the first big strategy. Is a couple times I've had very close games because a dude was able to either teleport behind me or he just targeted my hero first and just destroyed him. And a lot of the shenanigans and force multipliers for my army were gone, and I had a tough go of it for the rest of the game. Now, of course, they will be surrounded by legions of dead, So they have the lookout sir, the -1 to shoot, but it's still worth it no matter what. All out attack if you have to. Attacking them in melee is also going to be a little harder simply because they're surrounded by dozens and dozens of undead. So getting to them is going to be a little bit harder. Any death player I've seen usually castles them pretty good because a lot of them can either fly or don't want to get into combat. Other models aren't usually a problem being in their way. Secondly, unleashing hell, raining hell upon them is also useful for 2 reasons. 1, you're going to kill them, or 2, they're going to overcommit in protecting that unit and use up very important resources that you can then take advantage of later on. Either way, it's a win-win. Now, briefly, I've talked about graveyards. And here is how you can screw them over, right? Now, there are 4 points on the map that they can either deep strike in, resummon units from, all of those shenanigans. Now, if the player you're playing against is smart, they will place most of the points close to an objective marker or one really, really far away so that they can take advantage of you not being on the side of the board. 2 of them have to be in their starting territory, 2 can be anywhere. The best way to shut down grave sites from being these optimized deep strike zones is sitting 1 unit right in the center of it. Now, because you need to be 9 inches away from enemy units and you need to be wholly within 12 of the grave site and 9 inches away from enemy units, depending on your base size, they can't fit in. And then lastly, depending on the size of the unit that has to come in, they won't have enough space to be within coherency to drop in. So sitting 1 dude on top of it really limits the Gravelords player. If not, it makes them think, I need to overcommit and free up this graveyard, or to your benefit, they're going to hold off on bringing back a unit. To your detriment, they'll just probably resummon it back in the deployment zone, which, to your benefit, keeps that unit way back away from where you need them to be. Don't overcommit anything to a gravesite, right? If it's something to keep in mind and it's something that you need to do, but don't overcommit units to gravesites. Now, if they're close to objective markers, then it's not too big of a deal, right? But just keep it in mind. It's a good thing to keep on the back of your head because too many times I've been able to sneak units behind others, steal objectives, or, do a sneak attack because of it. The last thing you want is having to tear away forces, much needed forces from the main fighting that's happening. Lastly, the thing that I've seen to be the most effective is overcommit. No such thing as overkilling it. If you start taking a unit down, kill a unit. If it even has 1 model left over, it will swell back up in numbers and continue to harass you. Once it's dead, it might come back. It'll probably come back, but it'll be at half strength. And if you've been smart about the graveyards that they've placed, it's going to be away from the fighting and it won't be there for another turn or 2. Overcommit and overkill any units that can be resummoned or summonable units. So there you have it. A breakdown of the army so you can prepare better against your opponents, as well as giving you units to look out for and strategies that will help you make the army as effective as wet paper towel. So remember to shoot the heroes off the board, what spells to unbind and look out for, and screen your guys properly. If you do these things, I have no doubts you'll be able to kick my ass. Thank you guys for watching. I hope it was informative, helpful, and at least a small bit entertaining. Let us know what you guys thought about in the comments below, and any other armies you'd like me to cover so that you can better beat your opponents. Of course, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I stream 3 times a week on Twitch, and all my socials will be down below in the comment section. And that's it. I hope you guys have a good day, a good week, and I hope you win your next game. Have a good one.